All right, welcome back to the program. In case you're just joining us, it's time for our conversation right now. My guest is joining me from Lagos, Osato Guobadia, the energy analyst with Stears Business. Hello, Osato, and thanks for joining us on the show today.
Hi, Nancy. It's great to be with you.
Yes. Now, let's get started. Removal of petrol price cap, implementation of a market-based pricing system was first announced, I think, in March of 2020 by the Minister of Petroleum, Minister of State for Petroleum Resources at Simipre Silva. We've had the price range of 120, 150, 123, 50, 125. I just took everything like that from 145. Explain to my viewers, because it seems that this market is such a mysterious market and quite technical that a lot of us do not really understand how this works. What we are used to is government raises price, and there's been, of course, I took a look at the history. I did an analysis earlier, the history of fuel price in Nigeria. We've not seen much of decreases. So would you just make us understand what is really happening? Because even me, I'm trying to understand it.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, I'll try to do that. Okay, so prior to March of 2020, like you said, so what was happening was that NNPC was importing petrol into Nigeria, and because of you take the crude oil price into account, you take the fees that are paid when the petrol comes into the country. You have a situation where the costs in the expected cost, the expected cost of petrol, if you take into account all those fees and the crude oil and the price that they bought it from the refiners, the expected cost of petrol will be as high as 140, 160, 170, 180 naira. And the PPPRA had mandated that retail stations had to sell their fuel at 145 naira per liter. So I mean, if you just look at the business logic of it, you're buying something for 160 naira, 170 naira, and you're being forced to sell it at 145. So there's a loss there. So who was taking that loss? That was NNPC. So the Nigerian government through NNPC was taking that loss and was in effect subsidizing petrol. So what happened was in March of this year, the crude oil price tanked, fell. At that time, it fell slightly because of the decreased demand as a result of the coronavirus. And that reduced the landing cost of petrol to as low as 60 naira. So the government took the opportunity to say, okay, you know what? Let's stop fixing the petrol at 145 naira. Let's start a system whereby every month, at the beginning of every month, we adjust the petrol based on what the price of crude is, what it costs us to get this petrol into Nigeria. So that's what we've been seeing, and that's what we saw yesterday, being the first day of the month. The PPPRA has set the price of petrol at 140, at the maximum of 142 naira per liter.
Now, Osato, it seems from what is happening, that means that wherever the price of Brent crude or Bonny Light goes in the international marketplace, the PPPRA adjusts the price. Would you also say that our market is a free market? Or is the fuel market the same market like the rice market? Nobody regulates that price. So it's about demand and supply. Why can't this just be demand and supply? I wonder what Labour will be saying now, because I'm aware now that it's like Labour is kicking against that. But why wouldn't this market be demand and supply, take the natural cost? And if it does take the natural cost, would there be a need for a PPPRA? I know my head will be under the fire now, and Nancy's calling for, but you know what I mean. How many in other countries do we have agencies like that? So two questions in one.
Okay, so let's take it this way. Yes, you are right. The PPPRA every month they have said that they will set the price of petrol based on the market realities. And if you look at it, we can. It's a decision we have to make as a country. So do we want the price of petrol to be regulated? It's clear that PPPRA sees itself as an agency that's meant to prevent price gouging for Nigerians. Based on their statements, if I must speak for them, they see themselves as playing a role in preventing price gouging. to avoid the situation where players in the industry are making abnormal profits. Now, there's a strong argument against that, which is, the more the government is regulating the industry, that is driving away investors, because investors are looking at Nigeria, at the downstream sector in Nigeria, and they are saying, and they are, when they're thinking of investing, they are wondering, obviously, can I get a return on my investment? And when they see how when they see the strong government influence, and then they're wondering if, okay, at some point, they would have to sell for below their cost of acquiring the petrol, and they look at other countries that don't have that, and then they skip Nigeria. So that's an argument against. But for sure, the PPPRA just wants to ensure that the price is not being gouged for Nigerians, and at the same time ensure that the marketers are getting a fair return on for their business, which is important.
Osato, just tell me from your own analysis, do you think Nigeria needs a PPPRA with the realities of the market right now? Of course, they are there to prevent market gouging. One will say, okay, we have an FCCCPC, the consumer protection, that also tries to prevent price gouging for other consumables. But do you think that Nigeria needs a PPPRA?
And that's a question. That's a good question, because you look at, obviously, petrol is a sensitive sensitive commodity for us, a lot of Nigerians. I mean, remember what happened in 2012 when the price of petrol was high. So obviously, we know that wouldn't have happened for just any other product we saw. So petrol is definitely sensitive. And it's important to not use what is happening right now, not to extrapolate too much on what is happening right now, because the current crude price is about $38, $39, $40 per barrel, and the U.S. Energy Information Agency has said that they expect the price to stay roughly that throughout the second half of 2020. So the price of petrol should be roughly around this range, if and that's a big if the predictions are correct, because with coronavirus and with we don't know whether there will be a second wave and there will be lockdowns as a result of that, and how that would affect the crude oil price. But if we go with the US EIA's forecast, that should remain at $38 per barrel for this year, then you're seeing quite a stable market. But if, for example, something happens maybe next year, maybe afterwards, when the price of crude oil rises, so as has, in a situation where the price of petrol rises as a result to, I don't know, say 180, 190, 200 naira, a question to ask is, what's the buffer? We saw what happened in 2012. How do we ensure that the Nigerian people are not being, placed under severe financial burden? Because you remember yesterday, the electricity tariff was supposed to go up, was supposed to be reviewed, and that has to be postponed because of the burden to place on Nigerians at this point in time. So it seems like the government wants to keep a hand on that, on the price of petrol, to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand and cause unnecessary burden and unnecessary social unrest in the country. But at the same time, also ensuring that marketers can get, like all the other marketers and other players in the downstream sector can get a fair return.
Osato, what do you think the fair price of petrol at the filling stations should be if we're really operating like a balanced market? For example, in Ghana, fuel is more expensive at the petrol stations in Ghana than Nigeria. When I was taking a look at the price, I think Ghanaians buy fuel for about 315 to about 400 naira. In fact, on June 1, there was a circular also from the National Petroleum Authority, I think they call it in Ghana, from 3 pesewas to 6 pesewas. I think they increased it. And if you're looking at that, that's about 400 naira, because I think 1 cedi to one naira is about 66 naira. So, okay, 66 naira to 1 cedi. So what is the fair value of, what should be the fair value of petrol in Nigeria? Because it seems that we are all in denial in Nigeria, if you understand what I mean, if we should allow market forces take hold.
Right. And that's a good question. I think one truth that we have to talk about is that Nigeria's petrol prices, like you said, are low. I think across the countries in the world, I saw a statistic that said we are among the bottom 10 in terms of petrol prices. So our prices are low. So let's accept that. And also some other the argument against that is, some other oil producing countries are able to subsidize their petrol to make. I mean, Venezuela's petrol is at 8 naira per liter. I think Iran is about 22 naira per liter if you translate it to naira. So there's an argument that for these oil producing countries, if they're able to subsidize petrol for their citizens, let's at least enjoy some of that in Nigeria. Um, Obviously, the thing for us is we have to look at our own situation. In any case, when we're making a decision, we've been labeled as the poverty capital of the world, and we have to look at whether our infrastructure is enough to stomach a complete free market for petrol. If business people, transporters of food products, they are dealing with a number of challenges in doing business. And do we want to increase an additional burden? Do you want to increase the burden on them? These are all questions we need to answer, and that would help us. That would help guide us as to what we should do with the deregulation or regulation of the industry. And also, I want to say something that it's important to realize that there are two things: there's a deregulation and a subsidy, and a lot of people a lot of people have been talking about what the PPPRA did in March as being a deregulation. That's not entirely accurate because the deregulation would be, it would be more or less a hands-off. It would be government saying, you know what, let the free market work. But that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that it's been slightly deregulated to allow participants to earn a fair return. But the real thing that happened here was that we stopped paying subsidy in the form of under recovery. That's the real thing. So instead of NNPC spending billions to subsidize petrol, and what we're doing is we're saying, you know what, the price is going to reflect what the actual price should be. Nigerians will bear that burden. And we'll see how that goes. We'll see if Nigeria, the government is able to keep doing that, even when the price of crude rises.
Why is it that when this was announced yesterday, marketers, fuel stations quickly adjusted their prices upwards? But when the price was around 123.50, 121.50, 123.50, they didn't adjust it quickly. I think the DPR had to move in to ensure the prices were, accurate. But yesterday, a few places that I x-rayed, I saw the price just that second.
Right.
Why is it that Nigerians, we like when things are just going up and we don't even want things to come down? Must it be government? Do you understand what I mean? So do we like to suffer ourselves? Let me put it that way so that my people will understand what I'm saying.
And that's a fair point. This is the first time we're seeing the price of petrol increase since we started this new regime in March. And previously, what the marketers and the retail stations were saying was that, you're reducing the price of petrol from 145 to 125, but we have petrol that we bought from you at the time when the petrol was 145, so we have to sell that first. And we're having trouble selling that because everyone's on lockdown. People are not buying. So that was what happened then. Obviously, like you said, when the price goes up, they are less worried about the fact that they bought the petrol at, when the price was 125 and now they have said at 145. It's good for them. So, that's why you saw the quick adjustment.
Osato, I don't know if you saw this article yesterday. It's when I saw it from the Guardian, not Guardian newspapers of Nigeria. Let me just take a bit. When I read it yesterday, that petrol sold to Nigeria from Europe is dirtier than the black market bush fuel. I don't know if you saw that. For those watching us now, you can just quickly Google it. That samples from illegal refineries in Niger Delta found to be of a higher quality than imported petrol in a new analysis. When I saw this yesterday, when I read it through, I was like, come on. Why is that? We should be the gatekeeper. But the petrol, in fact, somewhere also in the article, the petrol that is imported into Ghana is cleaner than ours. So does it mean that price also has something to do with it? Because Ghanaians are paying more for petrol at the filling stations. We are not paying more for petrol at the filling stations. So that means that we get, a dirtier product than Ghana. I don't know if our officials have seen this and who the gatekeeper should be in this, perhaps the NNPC.
Right. So the DPR has the responsibility to clear imported petrol in Nigeria. I saw the article. It's obviously disturbing. But I think it would be fair to give the DPR a chance to respond to that. And about your other point about the price of petrol, price of petrol in other countries like Ghana and South Africa, it's relatively higher. Um, but it's important to understand that like the reason why the price of petrol is much higher in a lot of other countries is that the amount that is paid per liter in taxes is much higher than in Nigeria. I mean, look at the US. Almost 40% of the cost of petrol or gas per gallon goes to the government. We don't have that in Nigeria. The bulk of the costs are the importation, the cost of importing the petrol, storing it, charges, making getting a return for the financiers of the transportation. So that's one thing. That's one thing that we should keep in mind, that these countries are enjoying high or they're suffering rather from high, or we are enjoying relatively low fuel prices. But a big reason for that is that like our taxes are not as high as those in other countries. Not necessarily that we're buying some standard petrol products from our refiners, but like I said, I think we have to give the DPR a chance to respond to the article.
How about the sulfur content? I think what they call sulfurization, because the more sulfur in the products, it's definitely not good, but because our own Bonny Light is also a sweetheart to those buying it because perhaps of the less sulfur content and all of that. That also leads me to the issue of the modular refineries and why perhaps we need to get our own refineries to work, our own 4 refineries and the modular refineries. I know the Vice President, sometime, was it last year or 2 years ago, they talk about modular refineries because we see a lot of Niger Deltas, a lot of these are young boys or young guys, young men in the creek doing some sort of stuff. That's what the report was saying yesterday, that their own refining is even, cleaner than our imports into Europe, from Europe rather.
Mm-hmm. Right, and there's been some talk by the federal government on on trying to get them licensed and trying to get them into the formal industry. I think the special advisor to the president on Niger Delta Affairs made a statement last month to that effect. It remains to we'll see how that works out. But in terms of the sulfur content, yes, that is, like you said, our Bonny Lights crude and our crude and all our other types of crude are desirable by refiners because of their low sulfur content. So what then happens is that it's easier on the refining equipment when the sulfur content is low. So refiners look forward to that product. But what the Guardian was alleging was that the output of the refiners, which is the petrol itself, that the quality that we're importing is dangerous compared to what these modular guys are producing.
Okay, Osato, I think we should leave it at that, and let's see. Just like you said, let's perhaps give a chance to DPR to respond. I guess they would have seen it because that news is not sitting well with a lot of us. And let me say it again, from the Guardian yesterday, July 1, what's the headline again? Petrol sold to Nigeria from Europe, dirtier than black market bush fuel. So I think our government needs to respond, and just like you said, what are our gatekeepers doing? Osato, thank you very much for joining me on the show today to put in some perspectives to the fuel market. Thank you. I wish you a lovely day.
Thank you. Wish you a good day as well.